My wife thought she could steal my inheritance and vanish into a new life with her secret lover, but she had no idea I'd already built a trap she'd walk right into. The night I got the email was when everything changed. I was sitting in my home office, sipping water from a glass I didn't remember filling when the subject line popped up. "It's better this way." Attached was a photo, blurry like guilt caught in motion. There she was, Kendra standing on a balcony with a man I didn't recognize, the Arizona sunset, framing them like a postcard. They were holding wine glasses, her smile softer, freer, nothing like what she'd shown me in years. The timestamp said 11:22 p.m., her time. Her message was simple, brutal. "I've moved your inheritance into my personal account. It's better this way." No greeting, no explanation, just the theft. That money, $587, the was more than a dollar figure. It was the final gift from my Aunt Elaine, the woman who raised me after my parents died when I was 14. It was the life she helped me build, the future she wanted me to shape. Kendra's message should have crushed me. Instead, I closed the laptop and stared out at the backyard we'd designed together, the stone path I laid, the hydrangeas she planted. I felt nothing but clarity. She wasn't coming back, and what she didn't know was this: I'd already seen this coming. The trust, she couldn't touch it. But now she'd crossed a line that would unravel everything she thought she had under control. I typed 6 words back. "Thanks for letting me know." No anger, no fear, just precision. Because tomorrow I wouldn't just respond, I'd act. And that's when the real story begins. I didn't sleep much that night, but not for the reasons you might expect. I wasn't torn up with grief or drowning in rage. There was no pacing, no dramatic outbursts, no empty bottles on the floor, just silence. And in that silence, something settled in me. Not pain, not even betrayal, clarity. I lay in the king-sized bed Kendra and I once shared, staring at the ceiling, letting the pieces fall into place. Funny how the truth, when it finally hits, doesn't shatter you. It sharpens you. I thought back over the past 6 months, how the quiet changes had begun stacking up like unread emails. At first it was little things. Her phone, always face down. Notifications silenced. She started locking it. That was new. Then came the retreats. First it was a weekend yoga trip in Asheville. Then 4 days in Sedona. Eventually week-long deep practice getaways. All booked last minute. No itineraries. No contact once she arrived. Digital detox, she said. Part of the healing. The real detox I'd later realize was from me. And it was working. I remembered her asking about the inheritance. Innocent at first, curious even. "Where exactly is it being held?" she asked over dinner one night. "Is it in one account or spread out?" Should we think about diversifying, I chalked it up to interest in our future. The idea that she saw that money as part of our life. What I didn't see then and only fully understood now was that she wasn't curious about protecting it. She was testing the waters, measuring the vault before she planned the break-in. 3 months ago, I noticed she'd changed the login credentials to our shared online banking without mentioning it. I asked once. She said it was a security thing. Too many passwords floating around, she shrugged. I let it go. Not because I didn't care, but because I needed to see where she was heading. I was already suspicious. I needed proof. One evening I came home early from a client meeting. It was just after 6 Lastu. I pulled into the driveway and saw the backyard lights on. There she was, sitting on the patio couch, barefoot, wine in hand, laughing softly into her phone. Her voice had a warmth I hadn't heard in years. The kind you reserve for someone who isn't your husband. When she saw me, she stiffened. "Just Patricia from the studio," she said. But Patricia had moved to Colorado nearly a year ago. That night I didn't confront her. I simply noted the time. 6:13 p.m. She went inside, poured another glass of wine, and flipped on the TV. We didn't speak much, didn't need to. The point of no return came 2 weeks before the email. My financial advisor, Jerry, called me out of the blue. "We've had 3 failed attempts to access your trust account," he said. "They had your social but couldn't answer the security questions." My stomach didn't drop. It tightened. I asked him for IP logs, location, time of attempt. All 3 were from a network registered in Scottsdale, Arizona, the same city Kendra always visited for her retreats. I didn't say her name. I didn't have to. I called Rita Wallace the next day, my aunt's attorney, now mine. A woman who didn't flinch even in high-stakes estate battles. "Your aunt's trust is sealed tight," she assured me. "But someone trying to access it under false credentials, that's attempted fraud. We set up a monitoring system, flagged all suspicious activity, and locked down every secondary account. It was like fireproofing a house after you've smelled smoke." The highlight moment came 3 days later. I was reviewing some project files when I remembered the shared cloud folder Kendra and I used to store renovation plans. We had plans to redo the upstairs bathroom, knock out the guest closet, maybe even open a skylight above the staircase. That folder had been dead for months, untouched. But something told me to check. And there it was, screenshots of financial documents, my own account numbers, routing details, transfer instructions, even a breakdown of my inheritance with a handwritten note, minus 20% transfer buffer. Her handwriting, her files, her plan. In that moment, everything that had felt confusing or sad now felt surgical. This wasn't a woman who'd fallen out of love. This was someone who had mapped her exit strategy to the decimal. I didn't delete the files. I backed them up, organized them, titled them clearly for the legal team. Then I walked through the house, the art we picked out on that trip to Charleston, the couch we argued about for a week before finally agreeing on the color. It didn't feel like ours anymore. It felt staged, like a showroom for a marriage we no longer lived in. When Kendra packed for her final retreat, she kissed me goodbye like someone kissing a hotel concierge. "I might stay a bit longer this time," she said. "Really dive deep into the practice." I helped her load the bags, watched her taillights disappear down Victory Drive, and went back inside. I didn't cry. I didn't drink. I sat down, opened my laptop, and began making calls. Because now I had more than suspicions. I had intent, I had evidence, and I had time. I went to bed early that night, not because I was tired, but because I knew the next day would be the beginning of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. What she'd started as a quiet betrayal, I would finish as a calculated truth. And all of it, every file, every email, every lie, was about to serve a purpose greater than revenge. Something bigger, something lasting, just like Elaine asked me to build. The next morning began like any other coffee shower tie, but beneath the routine was a current of resolve. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was executing. The trust fund, the inheritance, even the home I'd once considered untouchable, everything was now evidence. Kendra thought she'd taken control. What she didn't know was that her move had activated mine. I started by forwarding her email, the one where she admitted to taking my inheritance, to Jerry, my financial advisor, and Rita, the attorney. No commentary, no emotion. Just a simple subject line, documentation requested. Jerry called back within the hour. "She really sent this?" he asked. I could hear the disbelief in his voice. "She did," I said. "And she has no idea the money was never in the account she thought it was." Rita didn't call. She didn't need to. She sent an email confirming the inheritance remained untouched and reaffirming that we had all the necessary legal protection in place. "We'll let her dig her own hole," she wrote. "Just keep the records clean." Then I made a third call, this one to Thomas Webb, a divorce attorney Rita had recommended months earlier, during a hypothetical conversation I didn't want to admit had become very real. His assistant scheduled me for that afternoon. By the time I left for the appointment, Kendra had finally texted, "Did you get my email?" I stared at the message for a long time before replying with one word, "Yes." 5 minutes later, she sent a follow-up. "That's all you have to say?" I didn't respond. There was nothing else to say. Everything that needed to be communicated would be handled by professionals from here on out. That silence must have rattled her, because 30 minutes later my phone lit up again. Kendra calling. I let it ring. Thomas's office was in a restored colonial downtown walls, lined with law books and framed certificates. He greeted me with a firm handshake and calm confidence. Rita joined via video call. "The attempted transfer creates a paper trail," Thomas said, reviewing the documentation Rita had forwarded. "And the money was inherited, never commingled, never shared. You've maintained clean separation, and now you have written evidence of attempted unauthorized access." He looked at me over his glasses. "You're in a strong position, Mr. Hartley. We can move quickly if that's what you want." I didn't hesitate. "Let's file by 4:30 p.m. Kendra's name lit up my screen again. I answered this time. She skipped the pleasantries. "You're being childish," she said. "No apology, no hesitation, just entitlement. This doesn't have to be difficult." "I agree," I said calmly. "Let's be adults about it." She exhaled, likely thinking she still had leverage. "The money's already moved," she said. "Fighting this will just cost us both more." "Where are you staying now?" I asked. She paused. "What does that matter? Just curious where home is these days. Miles, focus. We need to discuss financial arrangements." "Who's your attorney?" I asked. "David Lawrence," she replied. "He's already reviewing everything." I wrote it down. "That's helpful," I said. "Thank you." She must have sensed something in my voice because she shifted again. "You're not listening to me," she snapped. "This doesn't have to be a battle." "You said that already," I said, voice steady. "I appreciate your concern for making this easy." She hung up not long after. At 6 p.m., Rita called. "We've had 3 additional access attempts to the trust today," she said. "All blocked, all logged. Same IP as before. Scottsdale, not Sedona." Then her voice tightened. "We also found suspicious activity from last month. Someone exported account details using your home network. Same device signature we flagged before." My fingers gripped the phone a little tighter. "You're saying she's been planning this while sitting in my house?" "For at least 3 months, Rita confirmed. "We have everything documented." That was the moment it hit me. Not the betrayal, not the loss, but the scale. This wasn't a spontaneous act. This was a campaign. Months of positioning passwords, hidden accounts, calculated steps. She'd sat across from me at dinner, smiled, made plans, kissed me goodbye, all while slowly siphoning off the future we were supposed to share. And still, somehow, she thought I wouldn't fight back. If this story hits a nerve, if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, don't just watch. Share your story in the comments. And if you think justice matters more than revenge, hit that like button. Because what happened next, that's where things truly shifted. I called Thomas and gave him Kendra's lawyer's name. He nodded. "We'll file officially, first thing in the morning," he said. "And if they try to dispute the fraud, we've got enough evidence to bury the case before it even starts." "I don't want to bury her," I said. I just want her out of my life, clean and final. Then we'll make it clean, he promised, but not on her terms. That night I didn't go home right away. I walked the city a while past the riverfront, where Kendra and I once dreamed of opening a wellness center together. I remembered those early years when everything seemed possible. I tried to feel angry, but mostly what I felt was distance. Those dreams didn't belong to me anymore. They belonged to a version of us that no longer existed. I went home to an empty house, poured a scotch, and opened my laptop. I created a folder called Closure. Inside it I stored every email, every bank statement, every document. I labeled them by date, by subject, by legal relevance. She'd built her escape route, one file at a time. I would dismantle it the same way. Outside, the hydrangeas were starting to bloom. I stared at them through the kitchen window, thinking about Elaine, about what she would say if she were here. And then I remembered her words. Build something that lasts. It wasn't just about structures or trust funds. It was about truth, stability, vision. And tomorrow I would begin building something that did. The next day began with a meeting at Brightstone Bank, the same branch where Kendra and I refinanced our mortgage 2 years earlier. Harold, the branch manager, remembered me immediately. "How's that big project over in Bluffton coming along?" he asked casually as he led me into his office. I gave a polite nod, skipping small talk. "I need to review recent activity on all our joint accounts," I said, laying a folder on his desk. He sat down and pulled up the records. His fingers tapped the keyboard, his expression shifting as he scrolled. "There have been significant withdrawals," he said carefully. "How significant?" I asked. He turned the screen toward me. A pattern jumped out instantly: regular transfers over the past 6 months. It started small, $2,000 here, $3,500 there, but the amounts escalated quickly. The most recent transaction 2 weeks prior was for $47,000. I pointed at a receiving account I didn't recognize. "Is that with Brightstone?" Harold checked. "No. That's an external institution, Northern Lakes Credit Union." I'd never heard of it. He printed the full transaction history. 6 months, page after page. $178,000 total, siphoned off, while I was attending client meetings, architectural forums, caregiving for Aunt Elaine. My jaw tightened. "Can you pull up the registration details on that receiving account?" Harold nodded, stepped out, and returned with a printout. The account had been opened 8 months ago. Sole owner, Kendra Hartley. Associated address, an apartment complex in Scottsdale, Arizona. The pieces snapped into place like an architectural model. This wasn't an affair. It wasn't a moment of weakness. She had built a new life, an entirely separate financial and physical existence, while still living under my roof. She'd planned this move like she was drafting her own set of blueprints. Her second life had an address, a name on a lease, a credit union, a route for stolen funds, and suddenly the quiet evenings, the distant phone calls, the fake retreats, none of it seemed random anymore. By the time I got back to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Thomas Lawrence requesting urgent meeting. Tone significantly changed. That was fast and telling. By noon I was back in Thomas's office. He had already reviewed the bank records. "She's been building a future on your dime," he said, flipping through the pages. "This is no longer just attempted fraud on the trust. This is a clear pattern of marital asset misappropriation." He paused, looked at me. "We're not dealing with carelessness here. This is methodical theft." As he spoke, his assistant stepped in. "David Lawrence is on the line." Thomas picked up. "I've received the trust documentation," Lawrence said. His tone was less confident than before. "My client may have misrepresented certain aspects of the financial situation." "Which aspects, specifically?" Thomas asked. including her ability to access or transfer trust funds, Lawrence admitted. That appears to be legally impossible. It is so, Thomas said flatly. And now that we've added the bank records, the Scottsdale lease, and the attempted access logs, what exactly is your client proposing now? There was a long pause. Given the new information, we believe a revised approach may be best. Perhaps a private settlement discussion. Noted, Thomas replied. We'll review your offer, but for the record, my client has already filed for divorce on grounds of financial misconduct. The documentation speaks for itself. When the call ended, Thomas looked at me. He'll drop her by the end of the day, he said. No attorney wants to be tied to this. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. I'd suspected betrayal. But this level of orchestration, it was like discovering a fire had been burning behind your walls for years, and you'd only just smelled smoke. There's a strange quiet that comes with watching someone dismantle the version of you they once said they loved. What does it take to go from partner to predator? How does someone look you in the eye each morning, knowing they've signed a lease in another state? Planned your financial erasure. I wonder, have you ever uncovered a truth so calculated it left you more stunned than angry? If so, leave a comment. I want to know I'm not alone in this. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and asked one final question. I need to know who he is, not to confront. I just need to understand what I missed. Thomas nodded. We'll look into it. Quietly. That evening, a courier delivered an envelope to my door. Inside was a formal withdrawal letter from David Lawrence. He was no longer representing Kendra. A handwritten note from Thomas was clipped to it, first domino. My phone buzzed a few minutes later. Kendra. Again. I let it go to voicemail. She called twice more, then sent a text. What the hell did you do? I didn't respond. I stood in the kitchen, sandwich untouched on the counter, when another email from Rita came in. Subject line, update. The trust company had completed its internal investigation. Multiple unauthorized attempts had been flagged over a 3-month period. All of them logged with IP addresses, timestamps, and user device signatures. They'd referred the matter to their legal team. No action required from me at this time. But the path was open. As I read her words, something in me shifted, not just resolve, but direction. This wasn't about restoring what was lost. This was about protecting what still mattered. And soon I'd discover just how deep her deception went, starting with a single name. The name came to me quietly, almost without effort, as if my subconscious had been holding it, waiting for the right moment. Jason. That was it. I remembered the photo Kendra had attached to her email, the blurry shot of her and the bearded man on the balcony. His hand rested on the small of her back in a way that said ownership, more than affection. Jason. But I didn't have a last name, not yet. I didn't want to confront him. This wasn't about a scene or an emotional showdown. I just needed to know who he was to complete the picture of everything I had failed to see. When someone rewrites your life behind your back, it becomes impossible not to study every brushstroke they used. I started with a basic search: Jason Scottsdale, yoga, wellness, anything that might connect the dots. Within 5 minutes, I landed on a LinkedIn profile: Jason Berkeley, former investment broker, left the financial sector 3 years ago to pursue more meaningful connections through holistic wellness. Of course, his page listed him as a partner and instructor at a yoga studio in Scottsdale, exactly the type of place Kendra frequented. I found a photo of him from a community event, tall, fit, heavily bearded, standing beside a group of women, including it was Kendra. Same wine glass smile, same posture of intimacy, same man. Later that day, I saw Frank, my neighbor, watering his lawn. He'd once casually mentioned seeing someone drop Kendra off late at night, back when I was still pretending we were okay. I walked over. "Frank, that guy you saw a few months back, the one dropping Kendra off when I was in Boston, would you recognize him again?" Frank paused, thinking. "Yeah, tall, dark beard, drove a gray Tesla. Why, I pulled out the photo from the email. This him." He squinted, then nodded slowly. "Yep, that's him. He was here maybe 5, 6 times. Always late, never stayed long." I nodded. "Would you be willing to make a statement about that?" Without hesitation, Frank said, "Absolutely." That night I forwarded the photo, the LinkedIn profile, and Frank's name to Thomas. He replied an hour later, "We'll get his statement notarized and include it with the bank records, the cloud folder, and the trust access logs." She won't have much left to argue. He was right. And yet this wasn't just about building a case. It was about understanding the depth of her deception. She hadn't just siphoned money. She had carefully replaced our life, our shared plans, with someone else's. What would you do if you found out your partner had built an entire second life? Not just an affair, but a complete existence with accounts, an address, and someone new waiting in the wings. Share your thoughts in the comments. I know I'm not the only one who's been blindsided by the one they trusted most. The next morning, Thomas called again. His tone was different, controlled but alert. "We've got a complication," he said. "Kendra's retained Philip Barnes." My chest tightened. I knew the name. Barnes had a reputation in Georgia as one of the most aggressive divorce litigators in the state. Ruthless, expensive, effective. He's already filed for an emergency hearing to contest the financial misconduct claim, Thomas added. His petition says your wife can provide evidence that all financial decisions were discussed and agreed upon by both parties. I stayed quiet for a long moment. "When's the hearing?" "Monday morning." 3 days. I stared out the window of my office. The old oak tree swayed in the summer breeze, the same one Kendra once wanted to cut down because it blocked the view of the sunrise. I used to argue that the tree was the view. Now it just felt like a reminder of what I refused to see. "Let's give Barnes something to think about," I said. That afternoon, Thomas delivered a comprehensive packet to Barnes's office. Inside were copies of everything: the trust access logs, the failed attempts to withdraw from the account IP addresses linking to Scottsdale, the Scottsdale apartment lease, the joint account, withdrawals, and Frank's notarized statement confirming Jason's repeated visits. Most damning of all were screenshots from Kendra's home renovation folder, digital blueprints of her financial heist. By 5:00 p.m., Thomas received a call. Barnes wanted an urgent meeting to discuss possible settlement terms. I couldn't help but feel a strange wave of calm. The tide was turning. I wasn't just reacting anymore, I was leading. And every move I'd made had been measured, documented, and legal. When betrayal becomes strategy, emotions have to step aside. You stop asking why someone hurt you. You start asking how to stop the damage and protect what's left. That's where I was now. I looked around my house that night, our house. The wine glasses we once used for dinner parties. The books we never finished reading together. The porch where she said she wanted to grow old. It no longer felt like home. It felt like evidence. There was still one more step left before I could reclaim it all. And that moment was coming fast. The morning of the emergency hearing, Kendra arrived at the courthouse dressed in calm defiance. She wore the same slate-gray blazer she used to wear for business pitches, confident, composed, curated. Her attorney, Philip Barnes, stood beside her like a man prepared for war, his briefcase full of counterclaims and technicalities. But what they didn't know was that the battle was already over. Thomas was waiting with the settlement agreement neatly written, precisely worded. and backed by evidence they couldn't refute. No judge, no public crossfire. Just a consultation room, 2 attorneys, and the paper trail Kendra had created for herself. From behind the glass walls, I watched her scan the file Thomas handed over. Her expression shifted slowly. Confusion, recognition, disbelief. Screenshots of her own handwritten notes, transfer instructions, the apartment lease in Scottsdale, Frank's statement, IP logs, every lie laid out in black and white. Barnes leaned over and whispered something to her. She didn't look at him. She looked at the envelope Thomas slid across the table. "My client accepts the terms," Barnes finally said. The words dropped like a stone. Kendra didn't speak. She signed the agreement with a shaky hand, then sat back, like the air had left her lungs. I signed my portion, then slid another envelope across the table, this one less formal. "What's this?" she asked, her voice small. "The passwords," I said. "To the cloud storage house. Alarm anything you might need to collect what you left behind." She stared at it for a moment, then at me, searching for something. Anger, satisfaction, maybe regret. But I had nothing left to offer her. "It was never about the money," I said quietly. "That would have been easier." She didn't respond. Barnes stood motioning for her to do the same. She held the envelope like it might vanish if she blinked, then followed him out without looking back. When someone finally drops the mask, there's no dramatic unmasking, no grand scene, just silence and the weight of everything they can't undo. Have you ever had a moment like that where someone who thought they had power over you realized too late that you were already gone? Leave a comment hit, like if this moment spoke to something you've lived through. 2 days later, the funds were returned. $89,275, half of what she had taken from our joint accounts. Thomas confirmed the wire transfer and closed the case. In exchange, I agreed not to pursue criminal charges, and Kendra signed a non-disclosure agreement barring her from speaking about our marriage, our divorce, or anything related to the trust. It was over clean and final, just like I'd asked for. That weekend, I sat on the back porch watching the hydrangeas sway in the June breeze. The same ones she planted years ago while I laid the stone path beside them. They bloomed again this season, unaware of everything that had withered around them. I sipped my coffee, remembering how we once dreamed of expanding the house, knocking out the kitchen wall, maybe even adding a second story. That version of life was gone, but the frame remained, and now I finally had the space to rebuild it on my own terms. The moment of real clarity came that Sunday evening. I was flipping through the mail when I saw a plain white envelope. No return address. Inside was a check for exactly $89,275, the remaining balance of what Kendra had taken. No note, no signature, just the money. And with it a strange piece I hadn't expected. She didn't have to return it. Legally, she was off the hook. But she did. Maybe guilt, maybe fear. Maybe a final gesture of closure. Whatever the reason, I folded the check and placed it beside a folder labeled Foundation, because the truth is I had already started something new. With Rita's help, I was forming a scholarship fund in my Auntie Lane's name, an architectural scholarship for kids who had lost a parent just like I had. It would be funded by the trust Kendra tried to steal, and now by the money she gave back. That was the legacy Elaine wanted. That's what she meant when she said build something that lasts. It struck me then what revenge really is. Not a confrontation, not punishment, not destruction. It's survival. It's reinvention. It's building a life so solid, so unshakable, that betrayal becomes nothing more than a footnote in your story. The check would go into the foundation. A new student, a new chance, a future built out of everything she tried to tear down. The phone buzzed, just as I set the envelope down. A text from Jerry, my financial advisor. Dinner still on for Tuesday. Bringing that architect I mentioned. I smiled, closed the folder, and walked to the kitchen to make tea. There were still pieces to rearrange, choices to make a future to design. But for the first time in a long while, I felt ready. There was still one last thing I needed to do before I could call it complete. Something that would take me back to where all of this started, before Kendra, before the trust, before the betrayal. Back to a place built not from survival, but from love. I took the check to the bank Monday morning, not out of urgency, but because I wanted to close that chapter with finality. The teller didn't blink as she processed. It didn't know she was handling the remains of a broken marriage. I deposited the $89, $275 straight into the new foundation account. No hesitation. That money had once been poisoned with betrayal, but now it had a new direction, one that had nothing to do with Kendra, and everything to do with purpose. Later that afternoon, I sat with Rita in her office as we finalized the scholarship paperwork. First round of applications will open next spring, she said, sliding a draft of the press release across the table. I read it slowly, stopping at a single sentence. Created in memory of Elaine Hartley, who believed in second chances and lasting legacies. I swallowed hard. That line did more to heal me than any court settlement ever could. It reminded me that this all started with a woman who saved my life when I was 14, and somehow, through all this loss, she was still saving it. That night I walked past the old bookshelf in the study. On the top row sat a photo of Elaine, holding a blueprint, smiling that tired, determined smile of someone who'd worked 2 hospital shifts and still showed up for a kid's science fair. I whispered I kept my promise, then turned off the light. The next morning I received an unexpected email. The subject line read simply, Jason Berkeley, statement. Attached was a notarized letter from Frank, our neighbor. Thomas had followed up just as promised. In the letter, Frank described every sighting, dates, vehicle description, license plate, approximate times. All of it matched the timeline we'd compiled, Jason dropping Kendra off late at night while I was in Boston or Atlanta, sometimes staying no more than 20 minutes. The statement confirmed in legal terms what I had known in my gut. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. The betrayal had structure, timestamps, wheels, and a gray Tesla. I printed the document and added it to a sealed file I labeled closed. That file wouldn't go to court. Not anymore. But it would always be there, proof, just in case memory ever tried to rewrite what happened. If you've ever doubted yourself because someone made you feel like you were being paranoid, I see you. And share this story if you've lived through that same manipulation. You're not alone. But that wasn't the end of Jason's involvement. A day later, Thomas called with an update I didn't expect. We found something else, he said. Jason's name came up in another document, a shared lease in Arizona, Kendra, and Jason signed it together 8 months ago. I was quiet. Not because I was shocked, but because of how unsurprised I was. He wasn't just a bystander, Thomas continued. He was part of the entire financial arrangement. The account at Northern Lakes. It was opened under Kendra's name, but with Jason listed as a secondary user. My breath caught not out of pain, but from the sheer precision of it all. They had planned everything. They had built a life using mine. Do we go after him? Thomas asked. I thought about it. Financially, it would be complicated. Legally, we could argue for involvement in fraud, but we'd already achieved what we needed. No, I said. He's not worth the energy. This isn't about punishment anymore. It's about peace. Still, that final puzzle piece mattered. Jason hadn't just appeared. He'd helped her build the escape tunnel while I was still laying the foundation for our future. And yet somehow that knowledge didn't break me. It clarified everything. It told me exactly when our marriage had ended. Not with an email, not with a signature, but months before, when she chose to build something new without me. I spent the rest of the evening in the loft windows open, letting the city noise replace the silence that used to follow me around. The air smelled of pavement and summer. I pulled out the application essay of the first student we'd selected for the foundation, a 17-year-old girl from rural Georgia. Her father had died in a construction accident. She wanted to design spaces that made people feel safe. She ended her essay with a single line, "Good buildings, like good people, hold others up when they can't stand on their own." That line stayed with me long after I turned off the lamp. That night I didn't dream about courtrooms or balance transfers. I dreamed of brick and steel, of clean lines and open spaces, of rebuilding not just a house, but a life. The past had tried to bury me under its weight, but now I was laying the foundation for something new. And just when I thought the dust had finally settled, an unexpected message would arrive, one that would force me to face the last truth I hadn't yet dealt with. It was a quiet Wednesday afternoon when the email arrived. I was going over site elevations for a community project when the notification pinged at the corner of my screen. The subject line read, "You owe me a conversation." It was from Kendra. For a moment I just stared at it. Weeks had passed since the settlement. The funds had been returned. The house was being prepped for listing. And for the first time in years, I'd been sleeping through the night without waking up to worry doubt or the weight of someone else's silence. So why now I opened it? The message was short, almost sterile. "We need to talk. Not through lawyers, not through paperwork. Just you and me. There are things you don't know and things I should have said." I didn't respond right away. I forwarded the email to Thomas and asked, "Any legal reason I shouldn't reply?" His answer came fast. "No legal risk if you keep it civil, but I don't recommend engaging unless you're prepared for more manipulation." I thought about that all night. I wasn't interested in closure. I already had that. But something about her phrasing stuck with me, things you don't know. I'd uncovered her financial plans, her affair, her second life. What was left to know? The next morning, I replied. One conversation. Public place. No attorneys. 1 hour. We met at a coffee shop near the riverfront. Neutral ground. She arrived 5 minutes late, dressed in casual athletic wear that somehow looked more performative than relaxed. She sat across from me, her expression carefully neutral. "I wasn't expecting you to agree," she said. I didn't respond. I just waited. She leaned forward. "You think you've got the full story? You don't." I stayed silent. "You think Jason and I started something after Elaine passed?" She continued. "But it was before that. Almost a year before. That admission didn't surprise me. What surprised me was the calm I felt, hearing it spoken aloud. "I never planned to leave the way I did," she said, "but you were always so certain, so steady, like nothing I did would ever change anything." That struck a nerve. "You're saying your betrayal was my fault?" She shook her head. "No, I'm saying I was already gone, and you didn't notice." That was the truth I hadn't faced. I thought I'd been blindsided, but the reality was I hadn't been looking at all. She went on, told me about how she met Jason during a supplier event in Scottsdale, how they stayed in touch, how she started visiting more often, how it felt easy, exciting, something our life had stopped being. She called our marriage stuck, said she felt invisible, that every time I left for a project it reminded her how little of me was ever really there. It didn't justify what she did. It didn't erase the theft, the deception, the lies, but it reframed everything. "How long were you planning it?" I asked. She hesitated. "About 6 months before Elaine died. Once I realized what she'd left you, I started thinking about how I could start fresh, too." There it was. Not love, not heartbreak, just opportunity. That was what I'd always been to her, a stepping stone to something else. I returned the rest of the money, she said quietly. Not because I had to, because I didn't want that to be the last thing I left behind. It almost sounded sincere. Almost. I stood. "I'm not angry anymore," I said, "but I'm also not here to understand you. That part of my life is over." She nodded slowly, like she'd expected that. Then she pulled something from her purse, an envelope. "There's one more thing." Inside were 2 old photos. One was of me and Elaine, taken years ago in her backyard. The other was a photo I'd never seen before, me and Kendra from early in our relationship, laughing at some forgotten joke, her hand on my chest, mine on her waist. "I found that one when I was packing up," she said. "Thought you should have it." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. I took the envelope, gave her a final nod, and left. Walking back to my car, the wind picked up along the river. The day was overcast, heavy with that southern stillness that comes before a storm. The kind that makes you feel like time itself is holding its breath. I looked down at the photos again. One of family, one of illusion, both part of my story. But neither had the power to define what came next. Some conversations don't offer closure. They offer clarity. And that's more valuable than forgiveness. Because when I got home, something inside me had shifted again. And what I chose to do next would turn the last scar from this chapter into the first stone of something entirely new. When I got home that evening, I didn't go straight inside. I sat in the car with the engine off the envelope Kendra gave me, still in my lap. The air was heavy with that summer hush that always came before, a southern storm, humid, slow, like the world was holding its breath. I studied the 2 photos again. One was history, the other an echo. Neither had power anymore, and yet somehow they still drew something out of me. Not regret, not longing, just acceptance. I walked inside and set them on the kitchen counter beside a worn leather notebook I hadn't touched in months. It was the same notebook I used when Aunt Elaine got sick. I'd used it to document her medications appointments, every detail she trusted me with. I opened to the last entry, her hospice schedule from the week she passed. It stopped abruptly, like everything else I'd abandoned during that slow unravel. But for the first time in a while, I picked up a pen. Elaine always believed in purpose through structure. A building's strength isn't in its height. She once told me it's in its foundation. She wasn't just talking about blueprints. And after everything, I knew exactly what she meant. So I started sketching something new, something different. Not a house, not a monument, a community space, an open concept design that could double as a learning center and co-working hub. Natural light, energy efficient, modular workspaces, a place where young minds could build dreams with the tools they didn't know they had. I'd been awarded grants before for design projects, but this one would be personal. It would be the first project under the Elaine Hartley Foundation's partnership initiative. I emailed Rita the next day to begin the paperwork for acquiring a parcel, downtown, a half-acre lot, beside an old brick factory, long abandoned but zoned for civic development. The city had been trying to repurpose it for years. It just needed someone to see what it could become. By Thursday, I met with 2 city planners and a zoning officer. The meeting lasted 3 hours. I showed them renderings, walked them through the mission, and explained how the space would provide scholarships, mentorship, and real-world apprenticeships for high school students interested in architecture, engineering, and trades. "We've had proposals before," one of them said, but none with the funding and long-term vision you're bringing in. This was the turning point, not legal, not financial, but creative. Reclamation through creation. I wasn't just responding to betrayal anymore. I was shaping something lasting. That evening as I left City Hall, I passed the old courthouse where I'd sat across from Kendra for the last time. The irony wasn't lost on me. In that building, I'd watched something end. Just 1 block away, something entirely new was beginning. I called Jerry, my financial advisor, as I walked back to the car. We're going to need to free up another $100,000 from the trust for Phase 1, I said. I want it ready before fall. You're sure? He asked. That's a fast timeline. It needs to move, I said. It has momentum, and this time no one's standing in the way. I could almost feel Elaine smiling somewhere in the back of my mind. Have you ever taken something painful and used it to build something better? I want to hear about it. Leave a comment if you've ever turned loss into fuel. And don't forget to like and share if you believe legacies are built, not inherited. That night I had dinner with Jerry and a guest he'd been wanting me to meet for weeks, another architect, Claire Whitman. She was in her mid-40s, formerly worked with a large firm in D.C., and had recently moved to Savannah to start her own design consultancy. We talked shop over grilled salmon and red wine. She asked about the foundation, the build site, the students. She listened without interruption, the way people do when they actually care about the answer. What's your biggest hope for the space? She asked. I paused, considering the question. That it gives kids what Elaine gave me: direction, a reason to show up for something bigger than themselves. Claire smiled. That's the kind of work that lasts. The conversation moved effortlessly, after that touching on urban design trends, old cities with young souls, and how hard it was to find coffee strong enough to match an architect's schedule. As we left the restaurant, the air had shifted. The storm had passed. The wind was lighter. The clouds had broken. We stood under the awning for a moment longer, neither rushing. I'd love to see your renderings sometime, she said. You will, I replied. But I wasn't thinking about blueprints in that moment. I was thinking about how beginnings don't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes they come quietly, after a storm, after closure, after you've finally cleared enough space to let something or someone new in. And just when I thought the path forward was fully mapped, an unexpected letter would arrive that pulled me straight back to where it all began. Victory Drive. The letter arrived on a Friday morning, folded neatly into a plain white envelope, with no return address. I'd just finished reviewing updated construction timelines for the foundation's first community build when I saw it tucked between utility bills and a neighborhood newsletter. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable Kendra's. I held it for a few seconds longer than I meant to, standing in the hallway of my downtown loft, heart steady but curious. Inside was a single sheet of lined stationery, no greeting, no date, just words clipped and carefully written. I drove by the house on Victory Drive. The porch still looks the same. Hydrangeas in bloom. I stood across the street for a few minutes, but I didn't go any closer. I don't have the right to. Just wanted you to know I miss the version of us that lived there before everything turned into proof and evidence. Before I turned into someone I don't quite recognize. That version of me didn't deserve you either, but at least she loved you honestly. I hope you build something beautiful. K. There was no return address, no phone number, nothing that asked for a reply. Just a window into a moment she couldn't share with anyone else. It didn't change the facts. It didn't undo what she had done. But still something about it settled into me in a quiet, unexpected way. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even moved. I was simply still. That afternoon I drove out to Victory Drive. The house hadn't changed much. The wraparound porch still needed touch-up paint. The stone path was intact, though one edge had started to crumble from the summer rains. The hydrangeas she planted were thriving. It looked like a place people still wanted to believe in, even if the story behind it had come apart. The for sale sign was still up. My realtor had just told me we had a serious offer from a young couple expecting twins. They loved the porch, loved the idea of raising a family there. They hadn't asked for a renovation credit. They just wanted the space to begin again. I parked across the street and watched the sunlight hit the window of what used to be my office. The light caught the glass in just the right angle to reflect the trees across the yard, like the house was trying to hold on to something living even after it was empty. I stepped out of the car and walked along the sidewalk, stopping in front of the mailbox where I used to collect handwritten letters from Elaine during college. Sometimes she'd write 3 pages just to tell me she'd made it through another long shift and missed my voice on the answering machine. Those letters had weight even back then, not because of what they said, but because of what they stood for, someone showing up again and again for someone else. Have you ever stood in front of a place that once held your whole life, only to realize it no longer belongs to you? Let me know in the comments if you've had to walk away from something you once built like, and share this story. You're not alone in that kind of grief. The real estate agent pulled up a few minutes later, waved, then walked over with a clipboard. "Couple's ready to make an offer," she said. "They're not negotiating. Full asking price." I nodded. "Let's do it." She paused. "You sure last chance to change your mind. I made peace with it the day she left," I said. "This place deserves new memories." The agent smiled, handed me the final papers, and returned to her car. I stood there another minute before walking up to the porch one last time. I sat on the steps, remembering Kendra sitting barefoot in the same spot, laughing about how we needed to repaint the railings, but never getting around to it. That laugh had been real once, but the version of her I knew at the end could barely look me in the eye. Before leaving, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small envelope I'd brought with me. Inside was a key, the original front door key. I slid it under the welcome mat with no note, no message. Just a gesture, a small way of saying goodbye to the house, to her, to the man I used to be in those walls. As I drove away, I didn't look back, not out of coldness, just because I didn't need to. Some doors don't close with a slam. They settle shut, soft and sure, when you finally stop holding them open. And the moment I turned off Victory Drive, my phone buzzed with a message that would shift everything once more, not backward, not into the past, but into something I hadn't expected to feel again, possibility. The message came from Jerry, just as I pulled into the driveway of my loft. It was short, just a line of text. "Claire's asking if you're free this weekend. She has something to show you." I hadn't seen Claire since that dinner 2 weeks ago. The conversation had lingered in my mind longer than I expected, easy, effortless, and without any of the heaviness I'd come to associate with relationships. She wasn't pulling me toward anything, just leaving the door open, and I liked that. I texted back, "Saturday afternoon. Just let me know where." The reply came a few minutes later, an address, a time, no explanation. I smiled. Architects rarely explain their ideas up front. We let the structure speak. Saturday came fast. I arrived at the address. She sent an empty warehouse on the east side of the city, just past the industrial park, where old rail lines carved through the concrete like scars. Claire was waiting near the entrance, hair-tied back work boots, on holding 2 cups of coffee, like it was just another site visit. "This is it," she said, handing me one of the cups. "It's not much yet, but I thought you might want to see what I've been working on." We stepped inside. The space was massive, open steel, framing rows of dusty windows and light pouring in at sharp angles through the broken panes. Every footstep echoed. Claire walked toward the center and unrolled a set of drawings across a folding table. "I'm submitting this for city funding," she said. "It'll be a multi-purpose space for women-owned startups, micro-retail stalls, a small workshop area, childcare built into the core, and rotating mentorship sessions from local professionals." She looked at me. "Including you if you're interested." I studied the drawings. It was good. Really good. Not just technically solid, but human. Flexible design, intentional use of natural light, efficient material sourcing. The kind of space that makes you feel like something is possible the moment you walk in. "You designed this in 2 weeks?" I asked. "I've been sketching for months," she said. "You just gave me a reason to turn it into something real." That line hit me harder than I let on. There was no romance in it, no flirtation, just 2 people who'd both been through their own storms, finally meeting in a clearing. "I'd love to be part of it," I said, "however I can." She smiled and nodded once, like that was all she needed to hear. For the next hour, we walked the space-talking shop, acoustics, sustainable materials, how to convert old freight doors into skylights without compromising thermal seal. It was the kind of conversation that made me forget what time it was, the kind that felt like home, in a way even my house on Victory Drive never really had. Have you ever met someone who made you feel like you could rebuild your life without even saying it out loud? Let me know in the comments. And if you believe that healing sometimes shows up in unexpected people, hit like and share this story. On the way out, Claire stopped near the exit. "By the way, I've been reading about your foundation," she said. "That girl who wrote the essay, the one who talked about buildings holding people up, she reminded me of my younger sister." "She's the reason I'm doing this," I said. "Elaine always believed if you build something that gives people dignity, you've done more than just design. You've answered something." Claire nodded thoughtfully. "We're not just building spaces, Miles. We're giving people places to belong." It was hard to explain what I felt in that moment. Gratitude, maybe. Relief. The quiet sense that for once, life wasn't rushing me or breaking me. It was offering something. A chance not to start over, but to continue differently. That night I sat on my balcony, feet up on the railing city lights, blinking in the distance. I poured a glass of wine not to dull anything, but to mark the fact that this day had been good, uncomplicated, forward-facing. Inside the blueprint for the foundation's build, sat rolled up on my desk. Tomorrow I'd meet with the team and finalize Phase 1. Contractors were lined up, materials scheduled. The space would break ground in under 30 days. I thought about Elaine, how she'd insisted I live with my eyes open. She never told me to avoid pain. She told me to use it. The storm had cleared. The frame was rising. And just beyond that, something even more lasting was beginning to take shape. 6 months later, I stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony of the Elaine Hartley Foundation's first community center. The space was everything I'd hoped, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, laughter echoing from the youth workshop area, and a sense of motion that felt both grounded and hopeful. It wasn't just a building. It was a living memory rooted in pain, but shaped by something far stronger purpose. The girl who received our first scholarship spoke to a small crowd that afternoon. She talked about her father, a carpenter who died on the job, and how she'd promised herself she'd learn to design the kinds of places he never got to work in. Her voice shook when she said it, but her hands didn't. She had plans, sketches, conviction. I saw myself in her, or at least the version of me Elaine once believed in. I'd come a long way from the night Kendra's email landed in my inbox. Back then I thought loss was something you had to get through. Now I understand it's something you build from. Not all at once, not perfectly, and never without scars. But what you create in the aftermath can be more honest, more lasting than anything you had before. Forgiveness didn't come with fanfare. I never sat down and decided to forgive Kendra. It happened slowly, like how old paint fades under sunlight. One day I just realized I no longer needed answers, and that was enough. If there's one thing this story taught me, it's that sometimes the strongest response to betrayal isn't revenge. It's rebuilding. Quietly. Intentionally. Brick by brick. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever had to put yourself back together after everything fell apart, leave a comment and tell me what helped you rebuild. And if you're drawn to stories that reflect real human resilience, I invite you to subscribe to this channel, not just for the next video, but because we're building something here too. Something honest, something lasting. The kind of space where truth lives and where second chances aren't just possible, they're worth it.